Oh, it's
Oh, there.
asking for me to ask for permission.
Okay, well, go ahead and ask for permission so I can give it then. Is there a button to press? No?
There is a button.
Welcome to. So I'm recording it.
Yeah. Okay.
And I will post it to the same place I always post things, which is the Canvas about 2 days later. And if Tyler, and Eleanor are our hosts for this evening, they will be grilling you. Inviting you into an exciting conversation.
Definitely like that better.
And yeah, and then I will send you guys the recording faster than I send it to other people, just so that you can start jamming. All right. Well, should we get started?
That sounds good.
The recording is recording and the captions are on.
See you in a bit. So first of all, hello everyone. On behalf of the Theories of Writing Studies class, we want to thank you for joining us. This is a special night for Writ 2506 as we are accompanied by the esteemed creators Jeff Adams, Artistic Director of the Icebox Radio Theater, as well as Blake Thomas, Vice Executive and Artistic Director of Take It With You. These local legends produce some of Minnesota's best award-winning podcasts, which we will explore throughout this discussion. So, to kick things off, Jeff, according to your LinkedIn, you earned a bachelor's degree in history at the University of Oregon from 1986 to 1988. However, it was not until the late 90s that you discovered your passion for drama through community theater. What about that experience made you realize your calling as an entertainer?
I would say the interaction with the audience. It was I started basically when I was your guys' age trying to write fiction, wrote several novels, but had an opportunity to experiment with theater. Actually was at my local public library in my hometown had a murder mystery dinner theater script that they'd gotten a hold of and asked me to adapt it. And first time when you tell a joke on the page and the actors read it and hearing the audience laugh when they're supposed to, that was pretty much it. As I'm sure all of you know, as writers, it's very isolating. And when you move to drama, just open up an entirely new world.
Very cool.
Very cool. Perfect. So for Jeff and Blake, what's inspiring about radio theater and what's your favorite aspect of the medium?
Why don't you go, Blake, because I just talked.
Sure. I got into listening to radio theater when I started as a musician and still am a musician, but I really got into it when I was doing a lot of touring, and it's weird to say, but it kind of just got boring listening to music in the car. And so, I started really getting into the old radio theater stuff like The Shadow, or there's a really weird one called I Was a Communist for the FBI. And, when I just started, they, often refer to radio theater as theater of the mind, and I think that was really exciting to me because it opens up so many doors of creating a story that people can take however they want to take it. It's different than watching a movie. It's different than seeing a play. It's something that you really have to use your imagination to get behind, and I think that was something that was really exciting to me. And so learning how to write in that style has been challenging, but also just a ton of fun to be able to think about. Yeah.
Yeah. And did you want me to answer that question as well, or how should we proceed? Okay. Could I have it again, please?
What's inspiring about radio theater, and what's your favorite aspect of the medium?
I think the most inspiring thing about it is the speed with which you can get an idea and move directly to a story or a presentation that can be enjoyed by an audience. Other dramatic art forms like television and film and stage, it's months and months and months committed to a single story. And radio, audio theater now, and radio back in going back to the beginnings of broadcasting, always moved very, very fast. It's just the reality of the art form that you don't have costumes, you don't have sets, you don't have line memorization. Generally, actors work off of scripts. And that pared down element allows you to tell pretty much any aspect, any kind of story relatively quickly. I've always been more of a quantity than quality guy, which is not to say I haven't created some good things, but I'm more trying to bat 350, which means not every single story has to be knocked out of the park. I just love telling stories, and it is wonderful when it really comes together. But I think that's probably the thing that I'm most attracted to. Every writer has strengths and weaknesses. Lord knows I've got my weaknesses, but ideas is not one of them. And this art form, more than any other, allows me to just explore that. And that's probably the answer to both questions, what I most enjoy about it.
Yeah, if I could jump on that a little bit too, I think one of the things that's so exciting about this particular medium is that you're just hearing the voices in your head, and you don't have to. I mean, there's direction that needs to happen during the process of making it, but you don't have to worry so much about, this person is crossing the stage, this person is entering or exiting. It's really just more about hearing the voices in your head, and seeing it in your head, and then whoever's listening can take it however they want, but like I can see it in my head, and I can hear the voices in my head, and so I think that echoing the same sentiment there is that like you can kind of churn out some stuff fairly quickly, and not have to worry about the production side of it quite so much. I mean, there still is a lot of production that has to go into it as far as the recording aspect, but there aren't costumes, there aren't, and people can read things off of scripts on stands, and that part of it is a little bit easier, which is nice.
So kind of going off of that, why did you decide to do like live performance radio instead of following pre-recording like what Jeff does?
Because I love performing to an audience, and getting that feedback and getting that laughter live is really wonderful. I mean, I don't think it would work if we didn't have a live audience. Yeah, I guess that's about. I guess that's about it to the answer to that question.
Although I should jump in, we do some live shows at IBRT. Just kind of do both. I think part of our problem with live is we have a geographic challenge in that we're up here in International Falls, and we're a long ways from everybody. And we started in 04, which means everyone in town's pretty much seen our act. And we can only be so funny right now. And
I bet you can be pretty funny, man.
oh, thank you. To the locals, it's a small town. And the result is that we're not doing a lot of live right now, but like we're going to do an experiment at the end of this month. We're going to try and present 2 live radio plays broadcast over Facebook that will be performed live. In fact, the room I'm sitting in is going to be one of the studios because we're going to have our actors in 3 different rooms for COVID. And I'm really looking forward to that because that's something we've never actually done before.
That sounds amazing. So kind of, I guess this question would be towards both of you guys then. What is the most complicated part of doing a live performance of radio theater?
Blake, you can identify that?
Yeah, I can
process. There's so much.
I can try to tackle this one. I think, you know, for us, we have a 12-person cast, and there's, let's see, 3, 5. There's like 5 just voice actors, and then, you know, I'm a voice actor, but I play instruments, and we have our music director who plays piano, and then we have a Foley artist, and we have 3 other band members. Trying to think if I'm forgetting anybody. So I think the thing that's most complicated about doing it is just, none of this would be possible without our amazing sound guy. And so, when we do this, every time, I'm writing the scripts, I'm writing some of the songs, our music director is writing some of the songs, and then I'm there setting up with everybody and doing all that stuff. And so, I think the most complicated thing really is just like wrangling everybody in and making sure that, we're all having a good time, and we're in a good place, and we're as professional as we possibly can be. It's always a little weird, but yeah. I guess that's the hardest part, is just trying to figure out all the moving parts and get everybody into the same room, and make sure everybody feels good and feels safe, and we're doing a good job.
I'd agree. I think you can call it logistics or scheduling, which is not a very exciting answer, but it's the truth that getting people all on the same page, especially when people are dealing with jobs and family commitments and whatnot, is probably the biggest challenge. And just, finding enough time to do something that's worthwhile, therefore good. We could, like I say, without having to go through the steps of stage play that requires memorization and learning blocking and things like that. It's really easy to do a radio play at a certain level. It's one of the, I like to say, you could probably learn how to do an piece of audio theater first time out within a day or two, and then you could spend the rest of your life trying to do it well. It's one of those things where the baseline is very, very low. In fact, we have a concert series here in town, and we always do at least one show. A couple of years ago, a band canceled, and they asked us to do one. We literally turned one around without rehearsal, which I wouldn't recommend, but it was such that I'm a bit like Blake. I enjoy the history of radio drama, and I know there was a lot of shows back in the day, especially say soap operas, where actors were playing the same characters day after day, where they might not even have a read through. They just come in and kind of knock it out. But that's not really what you want to do year after year. You want to try and be getting better continually. And that can be a challenge, especially when you don't have, pure professionals to work with, where this is their livelihood and they want, they are putting their time in and putting their creative energy in because this is what they want to do. All my actors are great. I'm still amazed at the level of talent in a town this size and this remote. But they've got lives, and it can be the most challenging thing. The thing I think probably Blake and I deal with the most is just what he said, just getting everybody on the same page. And it can lead one to do a lot more studio work because you don't always have to have everybody there at the same time to do a studio recorded play.
Sure. I think also, just to again piggyback on that a little bit, it's just really important to like find a group of people that you want to work with.
Mhm.
Like that's incredibly important. Um, and especially doing something. I mean, especially doing something like a live radio play like the I mean there isn't a ton of monetary success in that, you know? Like there just isn't. And so like if you don't have a good group of people to work with, then you're just it's 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 just gonna suck and you're not gonna be happy about it. Like um and we can go on and on about how to try to monetize this and we still talk about like we're a nonprofit and we have a board and we have meetings and we talk about all of this stuff. But the thing of it is, if you don't have a good product, and if you're not pumped about it, and if all of the other people involved aren't pumped about it, then it's going to fail. Um, at least that's my opinion. I don't know. Who else has questions?
Well, continuing on, for Jeff and Blake, you've both produced massive bodies of work. And one of the things I wanted to ask along the lines of challenges is how you continue to stay motivated after all this time and effort.
I know this is the last thing I'd want to hear when I'm in my early 20s, but you get to a point where quitting is actually harder than keeping going. Um, you just, we just had just enough success uh, to where I can look back and say, yes, this was worthwhile. Um, that was my personal experience where, okay, I feel like the people that we have that are willing to continue to do this, we're having just enough fun that we're all really enjoying it still. We do have, no, we're not, no one's getting rich, of course, but we do have some monetary, uh, like Blake was saying, we're a nonprofit as well. And we've taken advantage of some state grants. If you guys didn't know it, Minnesota is the best public arts funding state in the union. And and I think if you just look for it, you can find original ideas to work with. Again, going back to what I mentioned, that I tend to just work with lots of ideas and lots of different genres. I imagine if I poured my heart and soul into a single story, I'd feel very differently. And that story didn't, because the reality is no one's really hitting it out of the park in entertainment the way they did, say, a generation ago. The entire field is changing, and that goes for recordings, television, internet. I actually have a daughter who graduated from film school in Los Angeles, and she's working for a producer now. And she is very aware that their industry is completely changing. So it's not like they know what they're doing either. There is still a big Hollywood product, of course, but it's looking very different now, especially post-COVID, because that whole industry was based on opening weekend. Can you make $50 million your opening weekend? You not even have a third of the movie theaters back when the COVID is over. So yes, it's easy to feel lost down here at the bottom rungs of audio theater, but you know what? We have complete freedom. That's one of the benefits of the internet. Nobody is really there. There's no censorship. There's no FCC regulations. We can literally tell whatever kind of story we want, and we can reach an audience anywhere. You know, one of the things I most love about IBRT is we're in this small town. I don't think we have any supporters anymore in town. Our audience is entirely someplace else. That's what keeps me going, and just knowing that, yeah, okay, I probably can count our actual audience. Well, maybe not on two hands, but there's probably less than 50 of them. But I just sent a membership certificate to England this past week. We do a couple live shows that people can use the chat feature to say, and I actually have friends now that started out as just listeners, and they're even some of them talking about flying to the falls and doing a fan fest some summer when we don't have a plague on the land, and that's more than enough to keep me going.
Yeah, I'd also say that something to think about is just like, what is success for you? Um, you know, like what is success? Because you know, unfortunately, um, you know, if your goal is to get famous, you're probably going to fail at that. You know, like, I mean, that's just a reality. I mean, you know, and I don't mean to say that in a bad way. It's just, you know, like, what is success? And, you know, to me, success, um, you know, isn't so much the payment for art. I mean, obviously, it's nice to make some money, but it isn't the payment for art just so much as that I love to do it. And I think that I've I've stuck with it long enough that I've actually been able to make a life out of it. But it's not going to happen right away, unless you're super, super duper lucky. It's just not. You know, you got to stick with it, and that's really hard. That's a really hard thing to do. Um, and I mean, I've I've gone through some really hard times with this stuff, but I'm glad I stuck with it. But I had to stick with it. You know, it's not something that um, was something that was just going to come to me. Um, it's it yeah. There's you know if it's something that you really want to do with your life, it's you're gonna go through some hard times for sure.
Alrighty. So can you both describe your creative processes from start to finish?
Well, I'm the primary writer with the theater, which is kind of one of the reasons I started it. Sort of, you know, I knew I had all these ideas, so this was a way to express that. Um, I have cultivated a pretty good group of people here in the Falls, which, as you can imagine, we don't have a lot of actors, and um, I just kind of cultivated with you know the local group or a small group of people that I know and work with well. Shakespeare did the same thing 400 years ago. He had a core of actors that he worked with. If it worked for him, who am I to argue? And so it's fun to be able to write and have people in mind even as you're writing. You can kind of obviously move characters in particular directions. Having said that, your subconscious needs to do that work. Do not do that on purpose. You'll find when you're done, he's like, oh, well, Ayla would look good in this role, or Caleb could do this. And once that is done, it's usually a very quick process for me to get sort of the script ready because my core also are my friends. So they understand there's going to be typos. There are going to be things we need to fix at table read. It's not going to be perfect. Table read, and normally for a recorded show, we'll do like 2 rehearsals. We'll do like a table read, which is literally just for me to hear the show, the play for the first time, and then a more serious rehearsal where we can dig into some of those questions. What am I doing here? What's this about? What kind of a voice do I have at this point? And then record, and recording, like I say, before COVID, we tried to all get together in one studio room. Now it's more broken up. We have some actors that even though they're here in town, they have setups at their home and they can record from there as well. Once that is done, it's up to me to do the editing. And editing music is from multiple sources. I do some of my own really simple scoring. If it's like synth that you can hold down a chord for 2 minutes in a horror show, that's fine. But other than that, there's internet sources where you can get music. I'll also record whatever Foley we need and get whatever sound effects we need. That's all edited together in software. And when I got a pretty good idea how close we are, about a week out, I'll try and start running some ads about, okay, or at least let the fans know, on our socials, we're going to be having a show on X date. And then it goes up as a podcast. And that's pretty much been the way we do it. We vary from that a little bit. One of our most recent efforts was a series that was show a day for a week in December. That was a little more challenging. And rehearsals for a live show, just double that. Just double that number instead of 2 or 4, at least. And that's with the core. There are people in town that want to get involved, and if someone new comes in, we'll usually add a rehearsal to kind of get them a little bit more engaged. There's back in the day, there was a particular show. We actually had a woman do 2 rehearsals before she realized we were doing that particular show on stage in front of an audience. She just had this mental thing where it's like, well, it's radio. No, we're going to be standing in front of people. And yeah, we got her okay. And she actually did great, but she didn't come back. So take what you will from that. Yeah, so that's my creative process.
Yeah, so gosh, I don't know. Doing Take It With You in front of a live audience is I don't know, maybe slightly different. And the thing about it that's kind of tricky is that we have some of our cast is coming up from the Twin Cities, and some of our cast, actually, well, 2 of them are coming up from Madison, Wisconsin. And so trying to, figure out where people are staying and how we're going to afford that and this, that, and the other is a little tricky. But that's where our board comes in, and, we have a great stage manager and production manager that takes care of a lot of that, which is fantastic. As far as the actual writing goes, we didn't do a season in 2020 because of COVID, but before that, basically what we do is we'll have a writing session, or a creative session, I should say, with kind of the core writers of the team, and we'll come up with a basic overarching story, and then we'll storyboard each episode, and then I do the writing part of it. I write some of the songs, and then I write some of the songs with with my buddy Matt, who is the musical director, and so sometimes I just write lyrics and I shoot them to him, and he writes songs, and we do it that way. Or I'll just write songs or he'll write songs, and um, I don't know. There aren't many rules. I think we're still trying to figure out exactly how to do this properly. And I don't think it's something that we're ever going to figure out, honestly. And I think that's okay. Like we'll get to, we're in a really good place now where it seems to be working. But it changes year to year, and depending upon how we want to work. And again, I think that comes back to just working with people that you really trust, and that you trust to be okay with changing it up if you need to.
So, after your creative process, what is your process that you and your crew go through on performance day? And some follow-up questions, if there's time for you guys to answer to this, is like, um, what are the risk factors of having a live audience compared to your pre-recording? Because, having an audience, there are a lot of like unnecessary noises you can have other than laughter, or if like a fight were to break out, just like what are the risk factors of that?
I never considered a fight as one
Yeah,
possibility.
we've
I don't know,
we've
it's just a
never had a
risk.
fight.
But you advertise a radio drama show, it's going to be a pretty gray crowd for the most part, gray haired. I mean, look this, and so the fisticuffs days are probably behind them. Well, I mentioned we about doubled the rehearsal time, and part of that is I've learned, I've been doing this 16 years in this town, and I have learned that there's certain things I just don't deal with that you would normally deal with working in the theater, like huge egos. We just don't have anybody. I do have a real problem with shyness. People are shy in this community. It's a very northern thing to not want to be standing out, or I don't want people to think that I've got a big head. And so there's a lot of performing with sort of one toe kept on shore, not totally committing to the bit. So frankly, sometimes I cut rehearsals because if they have to think about it too long, it actually doesn't necessarily lead to a better performance. They are amateur community theater actors, very talented, but I don't think I have a single person that's had a lesson, any sort of training, except maybe some high school theater. So it's in terms of the in terms of the risk of a live show, everything you mentioned, other than the fights, we've never really had to deal with that. You do, of course, take the risk that they just stand and stare at you, or stand and maybe smile, which to some extent, again, that's the culture. We get a lot of people that will tell me later, I had a wonderful time, but I look out into the audience and they're like this. That's their idea of a great time. That can be disconcerting, because when theater's really working and you've really got them and they're giving so much back in that moment, there's nothing like it. It's the reason most actors want to do live theater. And we have had that experience very rarely, but I think everyone goes in knowing you're rolling the dice here and you're hoping for that, but you can't need that, or you'll quit, because you'll end up quitting because you just don't get it that often, especially in a town our size. There's always something. We had the opportunity in 2018 to go to Bryant Lake Bowl in Minneapolis and do a show, and the weather screwed us, believe it or not. It was April. There was a blizzard on Thursday, and by Sunday, when we were doing our matinee, 3:00 in the afternoon, the sun had come out, the snow had all melted, and it was like 49 degrees, which at the end of winter, 49 degrees, you know how that feels, right? You want to wear shorts and flip-flops. We had a house of 34. Every single one of those people deserved a medal for coming in out of that beautiful Sunday to sit in. If you've ever been, it's a wonderful little venue, but it is dank. Okay.
It is. It's weird. It's a weird little place, but I love it too.
I love Bryant Lake Bowl. Could you imagine on the first nice day of spring, you got a show and that's the kind of thing you deal with. And maybe that's why I do more studio work, because it is always, that's probably the challenge. The challenge is doing it and believing and being willing to put yourself out there, and especially being willing to lead others into this. That's maybe the hardest part, feeling responsible for everybody and their emotions. You know, you want everyone to have fun and have a great time and feel like, hey, we were actors today. And the reality is you just can't control that. There's so many factors. Done. 30.
What are the other questions? What do we got?
Right. So, moving forward, I'd like to ask a little bit about the writing process specifically. Now, Jeff, our class had a chance to study some of your writing notes from Frozen Fright's Aurora Borealis. And one thing that intrigued us was how you go from developing a character into a plot and then a script. Why do you prefer this particular order of narrative development, and what are some tips for each step therein?
That was a conscious effort that isn't necessarily like my only system. I am always concerned that I'm too plot oriented, because that tends to be the way I've written in the past. Is come up with an idea. Hey, this would be a cool story. Let's tell a story about this. And then you shape a character to fit into that particular narrative. Aurora Borealis was a conscious effort to start with characters that I thought were northern and unique to the region, but also represented, real dramatic potential. So I think for me, starting with characters, getting to the point where I could sort of feel like, okay, I know who this person is now. They seem to have a voice in my head that isn't my voice. It was kind of easy to sort of turn on the story bit and just come up with, okay, well, what sorts of stories do I want to plunk this character into? Part of that, of course, was genre. I had an idea. I knew what Frozen Frights has been our horror series forever. And I wanted Aurora Borealis to be sort of like an anthology series within that framework. So we're not going to be doing musicals. We're not going to be doing romances. I knew there were certain realities within the horror genre. And then to me, it's just, let's come up with something interesting that can happen to this person. And radio is not strictly a long form, right? It's not something that, these stories aren't 2 hours long. So often, especially if you listen to old radio shows, the anthology shows like Lights Out and Escape and Hermit's Cave and like that, often it's just a single conflict that they have time for. An old 24, 25-minute broadcast, it'd be like, we're going to go to the house and they say it's haunted, and then we see the ghost, and then someone disappears, and then they resolve that, and that's it. That's your half-hour show. That's all you have time to do. So kind of beginning with character to me was almost a departure, but it was something that I felt very guilty about not doing, because virtually every other form of writing, what do they teach you? You got to start with characters. You have to have a character that's engaging and real before you can move on. But again, it's a dramatic medium and it's a broadcast medium traditionally. And that's the most difficult structurally to write in, because of course, a broadcast, back in the day, broadcasting meant if your show was 30 minutes, that meant probably 27 minutes with commercials, and you had to write things to the moment. There was going to be a commercial midway through. You had to have a cliffhanger moment right before you went to commercial. Otherwise, the audience wouldn't come back. So it's not like, say, writing fiction. You have a much more freedom to let sort of the narrative, let sort of the characters guide you. That was a conscious effort on my part to start with character and see, all right, can I drop this person into a situation that fits with the genre we're working in and still come up with something interesting?
Yeah, I think for me too, like recently, I I'm writing a musical with a couple of friends of mine, and it's completely different um, than writing radio. It's absolutely completely different. Like I think, with this, it has to start with characters, as opposed to just seeing the picture in your head, because I think that's what happens when I'm writing for radio. Is I'm seeing the picture, I'm hearing the voices, but I'm not. They're kind of cartoons in a way, at least for me, to a certain extent. And so trying to write for an actual musical is very, very different. Um, and um, yeah, it's it's just very, very different. It's hard. It's kind of hard to let that kind of cartoony way of talking go and leave that behind and actually talk how you would, actually write how someone would actually talk, um, if that makes any sense.
Yeah, that does. So you already kind of answered my next question. So, but then here's another question: is for both of you guys, how do you guys create a setting in your writing, and also kind of with that, how do you guys create the sounds? Because you guys aren't necessarily writing like traditional writing where you describe the scent of the air and the buildings and everything. So how do you guys recreate a setting using sound and their way they're talking and everything? And then while you guys are thinking about sound, how do you guys come up with those things, especially for live performances? Because we know, Blake, you create sound on set. So
Hmm.
kind of like, how do you come up with those different techniques of recreating those sounds?
Shall I go?
Sure.
Okay. We got a rhythm going, trading back and forth.
Yeah.
Um, there's a concept in sound design that I picked up from a friend, Brian Price, who did the Great Northern Audio Theater out of the cities for years. And he picked it up from someone that had worked in radio back in the day, and which is emblematic sound. What it means is there are ways that people perceive sounds that aren't necessarily obvious, and they can put you right into a scene. The example he always gave was you got a scene at the beach, and a lot of people, especially people from the Midwest that have never seen the ocean, when they see the ocean the first time, a lot of people that are like sound collectors get very excited. Hey, I'm going to record the ocean. This is a great chance. What they don't realize is when you're standing next to the ocean, it just sounds like white noise. And if you
Hmm.
played that back to, or put that under a scene and to tell the audience, we're taking place at the ocean right now, it won't work. They won't recognize what that sound is. The emblematic sound for beach is seagulls. If you have seagulls going, quack, 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 and everybody knows now we're at the beach. It can be very difficult to find those sounds because I think the instinct is, oh, I'm going to go record the real thing. And that will be emblematic. It isn't that often. I mean, it is a lot of the time, don't get me wrong, but it's not always that. Like I find real snow does not sound as good as cornstarch. Cornstarch is ancient. When you're doing footsteps in snow, you use, you either use shoes in cornstarch, or you can put cornstarch into a little bag and sort of squeeze it rhythmically, and that sends the message. Um, Coming up with those, I read a lot because, like we say, this art form in its sense, it does go all the way back to Elizabethan theater. If you go to the replica of the Globe Theatre in London, they have a wind machine, which is exactly the same design as was used in radio in the 30s. It's a barrel with like a canvas strap over it and a crank, and you turn this barrel crank, and it goes, and it sounds amazing. And those were just passed on from theater to theater over the years until it ended up in radio. And all of that information is still there. Which is not to say that if you need a particular scene, you can't go out into the field and actually record something. Um, the gear right now is cheaper than it's ever been at any point in history. So you can go, you need a city street, you can go to the corner in Duluth and record 5 minutes of the city street. And if, as long as you keep it low enough, you're probably fine to use that. And everyone knows, aha, we're on a city street. But in terms of finding Foley and ideas for sound effects, the information's out there as to what they did back in old radio and what they're doing now. And especially when you're dealing with a live show, you want to try and come up with this, and Blake, I assume you agree with this, that you want to come up with as interesting looking Foley as you can, because that's a big part of the show, these sound effects. Dramatically, as a playwright, I've always had a hard time with that, because you're kind of inviting the audience to leave the show, to sort of disengage from the story a little bit. But I think a lot of times if you're doing like a comedy skit, that's just fine. That's just part of the fun.
Yeah, no, I totally agree with all of that. I think I mean, I think um, when it comes to radio theater, reality is not something that you really need to think about that much, and especially with sound effects. Um, you know, people, it really is exactly what you said. Is the like, you know, you want to have seagulls more than you want to have ocean sounds, like because that's something that people understand right away. Um, and yeah, I mean, so um, the sound, our sound guy, I remember having this conversation about um, these crazy bowling ball kind of systems that they had back in like Shakespeare time, where they would do like thunder with that. Is that a thing? Am I wrong about that one?
Oh, you're absolutely. I have seen pictures and videos of that as well, where they had like a chute and you'd roll these big rocks, and
Yeah,
I imagine the whole theater shook.
yeah, yeah. I mean, it's just nuts. It's fun to come up with. I mean, that's the thing to me is that it's just fun to come up with these bizarre ideas and see if they work. And if they don't, then they don't. But um, you know, if they do, sometimes it's just super duper cool. Um, like, yeah, we've done some crazy things where we're just like smashing glasses and boxes and, um, you know, uh, uh, God, I could go on, but I mean, it's fun to make sounds and see if you can make it work.
We had a. I'm always finding new stuff too. Like breaking glass is a tough one because of the safety issue, and
Yeah,
we all
yeah.
kind of stuff. And then somewhere I read, get a like a canvas tote bag and just fill it up with glass shards and hit it with a hammer. And it's not perfect, but if you close your eyes and say, all right, yeah, I mean, it has to fit into the moment where
Sure.
look out, don't drop that glass, and then crash. Oh, you dropped the glass. Well, not everyone knows that the glass was dropped. And maybe the audience gets a little throw out of seeing how it's done. Although I tend to think for a live show, if you can actually break some glass, it's pretty cool.
It is, and I think for us, it's, what we do is primarily a comedy show, and so we can get away with a lot of things. And, if we want to break some glass in a bag or something like that, I think it's actually probably pretty entertaining for everybody. So,
Yeah. Have you ever heard of Our Fair City from Chicago?
no.
Yeah, this is a wonderful podcast. I think their cast is spread out, but I did get a chance to see their live show one time. Check it out, Our Fair City. I think the entire podcast is still online, but I saw their live show at one point, and I don't know how they worked smashing a watermelon into the narrative, but they did. And when they did, they really played it up. They had fun with it. They had like four Foley artists, and they all ducked behind the table. And when they came back up, they had eye protection on. And the biggest guy, David, had a sledgehammer when he came up, and they had the watermelon on the pedestal. And I don't even remember what the moment is, but everyone in that audience knew what was coming. And the weird thing is, it didn't even sound that great, but I didn't care.
Yeah, I mean, some of that stuff is just it's just fun to watch too. Sorry, I feel like the two of us have just been talking for a while. Does anybody have more questions?
Yes, taking a bit of a turn, how do you both promote your brands and generate profit or income?
We, like I mentioned grants earlier, and we do take about half of our income from donations, fundraisers. We do have a Patreon, and yeah, I think that's about it. We don't really have a sales system. We have merch because you can get a threadless store and have merch for practically nothing except the time to design the designs. But that's pennies. That really doesn't add up to much. And there really isn't a recording industry anymore. 10 years ago, we could sell CDs at a live event. Not so much anymore. It's just something that, really older people would be interested in. In terms of developing the brand, unfortunately, I kind of do all the business side as well, and I always will short shift that to do something creative. I figure that's more important. So I am just beginning to get the idea of branding beyond basics, social media, Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram. That's all we do. We do have a website because I figure you got to have, people might come looking for you. We do a few ads on Facebook. We, as a nonprofit, we are part of Google has what they call the Google Grants program, which is they'll let limited ads for a nonprofit, and that's good. That brings some people to the landing page on the website. Other than that, it's the problem with the whole podcast universe is there's just so many. I actually looked it up once, just asked Google how many podcasts are there, and Google's guess was 350,000, with somewhere north of 30 million episodes currently somewhere online. So we finish a show and I just go, well, there's another grain of sand on the beach. That's how it is. And we've used the same logo for over 10 years because I really like it. Had a professional artist put it together. I said, okay, that's our brand. And yeah, just what I have time for is pretty much the socials and a few more ads than we normally run because we have some funding for advertising this year. But yeah, and income would be combination grants, donations, and the Patreon.
I got a follow-up question just because I'm curious. You can, I don't know if buy is the right word, but you're available as audiobooks on Amazon too, yeah?
Yeah, well, we were.
Is that
We
like a promotion
we
thing?
actually came in kind of. Oops, sorry.
Oh, I'm just curious because a lot of them are free, and I'm curious about like, was that like a here's your first taste for free, follow us away from Amazon kind of thing, or what was going on with that initiative?
Initially, I did that because I could, and it seemed like something, I never did understand why the internet's had so much redundancy, where things are available everywhere. We haven't put anything new up on Amazon in a long time because they finally sent out an email saying, look, if you got free stuff, don't put it up here as well. Don't sell it as well, which makes sense because if a customer found out they just bought something from Audible that was available for free, they wouldn't contact me. They'd contact Audible and give them grief. So I've always been broadnet, the biggest net possible. Where can we distribute this stuff? Audible.com, sure. We still have a CD subscription program where 5 wonderful geriatric people, and they are all past 60, get a monthly CD from us that I charge them a monthly fee for. And that's one more tiny drop in the bucket.
Thank you.
So, yeah, I know we talked about there's just lots of content out there and a lot of people competing for attention in today's market for entertainment. So, as people aspiring to become creators, potentially even future podcast and radio theater creators, what advice would you give us to start out?
Blake's turn.
Yeah.
Handle that one.
Oh boy. I mean, again, I think it's just Well, let me shoot something back. Like, what is it that you actually want to do?
Well, currently I'm interested in potentially going into screenwriting or maybe freelance journalism, and then maybe even keeping a part-time job just to pay bills while trying to make that work. But this is my first year at UMD, so I'm still figuring that out.
Gotcha. Um, Again, I think just surround yourself with people that you believe in. I think that's the most important thing. And um, if you're not entirely sure what it is that you want to do right now, just find just find those awesome people.
Thank you.
You know, um, like that's that's the most important thing.
And
Like,
when you say to people, do you mean other creators or audience or maybe even both?
Um, just people that you trust. Find those people.
I guess to kind of pop in, um, as like a quick fun fact, I once made a podcast like last spring, and it was just kind of like a really like quick fun kind of thing to do. So like I got it up on like Spotify and iTunes and everything, and I tried to promote it, but I'm not that great. So it's like as a beginner podcaster, what are some tips to just trying to get your name out there to just kind of get like your first 100 listeners?
I mean, a lot of that stuff I'm sure you've heard already. The social media and get us, talk to people who are doing something similar, see if they'll follow you back, if you follow them, all that kind of thing, that kind of boring thing. The best bit of advice I can give anyone, especially in podcasting, do look towards producing lots of content. That's just the age we're in right now. People just produce tons and tons and tons of stuff. It's not a world where you put your heart and soul into a single project and then sort of launch it into the world and hope for the best. It's people are doing, weekly shows for an awful, for years. And that's just kind of the nature of the beast. I think I don't know if this is advice, but it's more encouragement. Going back to Ty's question, uh, understand you're living in a very different time frame than practically anyone that's older than you. Certainly people as old as Blake and myself and David. And it is in many ways, sorry, everyone under that.
We're old. I get it.
It is a different world, but yeah, you go back a generation and getting involved in the arts was a totally different thing because your primary job starting out was to impress somebody who had the keys to the kingdom, right? The guy that owned the recording studio or the movie producer, and when you came in, you were going to serve an apprenticeship. You were going to go to work sweeping the floors and bringing people coffee for a while. That's literally how Prince started. Prince started at a recording studio in North Minneapolis
Yeah.
doing that kind of work. And then finally he got brave enough to ask the owner, hey, could I, if I pay for the tape, can I use the studio at night when no one is in there? And that was the way it used to be. Your generation, and I imagine every generation moving forward, you get to make your thing now. Whatever it is you're doing, your movie or publish your book or make your radio show, you get to make it now. And there are engines available to, get that work out there. And it's not a matter of finding a producer that can then look at your work as a product and know how to promote it. That's just not the world we're in anymore. In fact, I asked my wife, who's director of our public library here in town, about the publishing industry and how it's changed. And I asked her, is there still a slush pile? Do people just send manuscripts to agents and editors anymore? And she said, no, not really. For the most part, if a reader is looking for a new writer, they go around Kindle. They see who's got decent sales, who's got a lot of Twitter followers. And then you read the stuff and make sure it's decent and it's something that can be developed. But that's the real difference between now and the past. You guys can make your thing now, and it's going to have to swim with a lot of other people's things, some of whom never should have stepped in front of the microphone. There's bad stuff out there, not evil, but just incompetent. Some people get really, really excited when they discover that they can make a movie. So they run out with their iPhones and they make a movie, and that's great. That's fine. But if you're aiming to like have a career and maybe make something that can really move people someday, that's to me the exciting part about the present, is that you get to do it now, no matter what. And you get to develop and be more creative and try to learn. The downside, of course, is the old system kind of had a built-in apprenticeship to it. You know, you weren't even going to get in front of an audience until you pretty much figured out a lot of stuff. A lot more soul searching now, I think. A lot more, you know, you do like B, you mentioned you did your podcast, you put it up and kind of nothing happened, right? Because most of mine, kind of nothing happens. And the only advice I can give you specific to that is make another one, and then another one, and then another one. And you'll find those 2 or 3 people who will, you know, start out saying, hey, you're really interesting, or you're really funny, or whatever it is you're trying to be. And that I find eventually it's the most worthwhile thing, because seriously, who's famous now, actually famous? I mean, how many, I saw the Super Bowl show. I'm sorry, I don't know who The Weeknd is. I have no idea.
God, I could talk about that for days.
But usually, you know, right? I mean, I knew who Gaga was and who Katy Perry was, but at least 4 of my friends said they watched that halftime show, immediately went to YouTube to watch Prince's from whatever it was, 1999.
Oh man, when he was playing his fucking blue guitar in the rain.
In the pouring
Come
rain.
on.
Yeah, you
Purple
never.
guitar in the rain.
Yep.
I got to ask you a question then, Jeff, and Blake as well. But Jeff, you've done like 250 of these things, right?
Yeah,
What'd you say?
about that.
Yeah. Are there any that you've taken down because you look back at them and go, oh, I'd prefer not that early work be visible to the world?
No, because actually even our very first show was okay. It was fun. Everyone had fun. And it was a family kind of mystery thing. And, you know, and we were all down there in the basement of the radio station. My daughter was in it, and she was like 10 at the time. She was adorable. Let's see, taken down. There was one, like a lost show, but I can't remember what it is now because I put it out of my mind. It's painful, David. Thank you for bringing it up. I don't know. I mean, if someone's going to find stuff and take issue with it because of its quality, I'm okay with that, because that's still, in my mind, preferable to silence or, you know, pats on the back. Nice job, pat, pat, pat. You know, I could live the rest of my life and never hear that again. I'd be happy. Indifference is the worst.
Yeah, I think as an artist, you're gonna make some stuff that you just don't like that much, and I think you leave it there. Like I don't think you take it down. You don't do anything with it. It's just there. It's okay. Like it's you've chosen a life to put things out there, and that's okay. And some of it isn't going to be great, you know.
Doesn't cost anything. Doesn't cost
We have
anything.
a last question.
Yeah.
One last question. I know we're running out of time here, so one last question, students.
As for us, we're all done. We're just about to close.
Woohoo!
Yeah. We kind of ran out of time. There's still a few more questions, but I think we're good for now.
And
Okay.
once again, I just want to thank you both for joining us. You've said a lot of very inspiring things tonight and a lot of very informative things. And I think just for everybody in this room that's aspiring to be a writer or an artist of some sort in the future, this has been a very helpful night.
Wonderful. Well, thanks so much for saying that. That's great, and I hope we get to do it again and chat again.
Yeah, and this is very fulfilling for me, and I imagine for Blake as well, because like we mentioned, there's not a lot of monetary rewards, but being asked to come share our wisdom is great and
Yeah.
very fulfilling from this side of the fence as well.
Yeah.
Now that the event is over, I'm going to toss a couple of last things on the table.
Sure.
Number one, it was super awesome to have to explain to the students the part of your notes where you talked about convergence cosplay. Very gratifying to me, Jeff, in your notes about the character.
You're a giant nerd, David. You're welcome.
My nerd knowledge was useful. Number two, Blake, there's a ton of parts of you, and of you too, Jeff, but I'm thinking specifically of Ty because he's on the screen there. Ty had to explain to me what I was looking at when I was looking at the musical part of your performance. We haven't
Uh-huh.
talked about that at all, and as you can tell, Ty is kind of into music and sound stuff based on his background behind him.
Yeah.
And so at some point he may want to touch base with you about the musical part of Take It With You, and I hope if you get it.
Sure. Anytime. Anytime.
And yeah, we're not old.
All right, I'm old.
I'm feeling pretty old, but I don't know.
We learned so much reading the various drafts and notes, looking at your stuff, and the way it all kind of comes together in the end, and the fact that you gave the students a look under the hood was so very valuable. So
Awesome.
Is there a after party? Do we linger and answer questions if we want? Because I'm willing to do that for 10 minutes anyway.
I mean, well, students, why don't we call this the end of the class? But if you do have a reason to want to stick around, you're certainly welcome to do so. I will stop the recording though at this point so that we can have the after party conversation.
Sure.
Okay.
So otherwise, can we get some? Can we turn our microphones long enough to applaud and all that kind of stuff?
I'll just.
Zoom makes this very unsatisfying.
Yes.
All right. Stopping recording.